Russia and China in the next period ahead in order to let the U.S. British world domination go on for another 100 years. Now that's the project. That's more ambitious than any neocon, and it's more adventurous and it's more dangerous. So people in Europe had better wake up that silly romantic illusion they have about Obama is going to be suicidal for them if they don't understand this. There are right-wingers who don't know how to attack Obama. I would attack Obama in the way that I've just said. He is a puppet of finance capital of the worst possible circles, of David Rockefeller, George Soros, and this group. And their project is extreme austerity, savage reductions in the standard of living, and the basically immiseration and impoverishment of the United States. In terms of foreign policy, it is this plan to have a global showdown with Russia and China. So for that they need left cover. Now, the right-wingers don't know how to attack this, so they basically try to argue either that Obama is a communist, which I think is not accurate, because he's a servant of finance capital, how could he be a communist, or that he's a Muslim, because his middle name is Hussein. But I would add one thing. If you want to become President of the United States, you're asking to get your finger on the thermonuclear button. There's a button that launches intercontinental ballistic missiles with H-bombs on them. From that point on, we, the public, want to know everything about Obama, everything. The guy is a puppet of the worst circles of imperialism. In other words, he's interested in the same imperialist project carried out in a much more effective and clever way, although ultimately in a more insane way. Let's just take the case of Iran. The neocon looks at Iran and says, somebody like McCain, right, he says, we want to bomb Iran. Brzezinski says, you're crazy, you can't do that. You're too weak, you're too bankrupt, you're too isolated, you're too hated. You know what you do with Iran, says Brzezinski? He says, I don't want Iran at war with the United States. I want Iran at war with Russia. Let's turn Iran into a tool, into a puppet, and play Iran against Russia. And Brzezinski said, I show you how to do that. I played Afghanistan against the Soviets, and I destroyed the Soviets. So if you look at Syria, the neocon looks at Syria and says, let's attack Syria. Brzezinski says, you're crazy, don't do that. Make a deal with Syria. There's a very important Russian naval base in a place called Tartus on the Mediterranean. And Brzezinski has just been in Iran. He went for the Rand Corporation a couple of months ago. The goal would be to get the Russians out of Tartus and try to turn Syria, if possible, against the Russians. So instead of having Muslims as being the target, the Muslims become cannon fodder for the project against Russia and China. Let's take Chinese Turkestan. Right? There's a Muslim minority there, the Uyghurs. Right? What's Brzezinski's plan for them? It's to have them fight and die in some kind of an insurrection. He's got an insurrection going in Tibet. The idea right now is forget about the target list that you've known. The target list is getting bigger. Let me add a couple of others to the target list. Let's take Sudan, Arab country, Arab League. Why is Sudan being targeted? What's the story with Darfur? Why are they doing that? Are they really concerned about a humanitarian emergency? No. They're concerned because 7% of the oil for China comes from Sudan. They're looking desperately for a pretext to go into Sudan, overthrow General Bashir, and cut off that oil going to Sudan. Now let's take the really big one. Up until now, everybody's been focused on Iran. And will the U.S. attack Iran? Will the Israelis attack Iran? I say no, they won't. The U.S. and the British will not. I can't exclude some Israeli crazy. That's possible. There's an attack that's going on right now, and it's Pakistan. Pakistan is another Muslim country with 160 million people, and they have nuclear weapons, and they have the means to deliver them. Now, back last summer in Chicago, there was a debate among the Democratic candidates, and Obama came out and said, I want to have the unilateral U.S. bombing of northwest Pakistan. Mrs. Clinton said, no, you don't want to do that. McCain said no. Even Bush said no. And now, the U.S. is doing what Obama demanded. The U.S. is bombing northwest Pakistan. And indeed, the U.S. and NATO troops and the Afghan troops are preparing to invade Pakistan across the Afghan border. Now, why are they doing that? This is the one part of the world where they still talk about Bin Laden, al-Qaida, the war on terror, all of this idiotic mythology. Why are they doing it? They want to destroy the Pakistani central government. You probably saw the statement the other night from the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Gilani. He says, our national honor and sovereignty does not allow foreign troops to come into our country. And he's absolutely right. But the U.S. and NATO are now going to do that under the new policy. The goal is to destroy Pakistan. You see Iraq now carved into 3 parts. Pakistan would be into 4 or 5 parts. It would be Sindh, Pashtunistan, Baluchistan, Waziristan, and on, and that will never end. That's the goal. Now, why are they doing that? Not so much because it's an Islamic country, although that does figure in. Mainly because it's a potential ally of China. It's traditionally friendly to China, and under conditions of world crisis, Pakistan would tend to gravitate back towards China. So look at our hit list now. We've got not Iran on the hit list anymore. Iran is now a candidate to be played against Russia. But the hit list is now Sudan and Pakistan. So that's the change. And Obama is the one who demanded the attacks on Pakistan, when everybody else said no. You're so obsessed with Israel and the Persian Gulf and Iraq and Iran that you've lost the big picture. And the real power in the world, of course, is Russia, China. Those are countries that are seriously capable of resisting the U.S. and the British, and you've got to focus on them. And India, of course, would then become a big asset in that regard. Japan is another one. There's just been a summit of Japan and China. And the big question, of course, there was, would Japan become a staging area for the kinds of destabilizations of China that Brzezinski is planning? So the Japanese government, fortunately, has said no. The Japanese defense minister said that chaos in China would be the worst possible outcome for the interests of Japan. So it looks like Japan is saying no. Looks like Taiwan is saying no. So everybody in the world is now in the process of choosing sides. Now, the point of having Obama is you've got the same old imperialism, and you're going to give it a facelift. And one goal is to have that face for Africa. Let me just do Africa for a second. The goal in the case of Africa is to kick the Chinese out. It's to deprive China of the oil. We've seen it with Sudan. Ultimately, Brzezinski would like to isolate China, encircle it, and then reach a point where China would have nowhere to turn for oil except the Russian oil wells in eastern Siberia. In other words, the end product of this entire policy is to play China against Russia and get rid of both of them, destroy both, and then the U.S. and the British can settle in for another 100 years of world domination. NATO expansion, far beyond the lines that were agreed on back in 1990 and 1991. You may remember there was an agreement that said the U.S. would not even go into East Germany. And now we're all the way to Lithuania and Georgia and Ukraine and all these places. Now, what we're headed into is a Polish missile crisis. You had the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. That was bad enough. The Polish missile crisis is going to be worse because there are elements in Poland, there are elements in the Czech Republic. There's even an element in Lithuania. There's a forward tentacle of that system in Lithuania, right on Russia's doorstep. What is the goal of that? It is the ability to have a first strike, surprise attack, to destroy the Russian nuclear deterrent on the ground, and then the second strike launched by the Russians can somehow be suppressed by these missiles in Poland. So it is a step towards World War III. This is now a full strategic envelopment. This is not just Iraq and the Persian Gulf. This is now a worldwide strategy. And again, the mind of it is Brzezinski. This is already being implemented in the United States. The policies that they're carrying out are from Brzezinski, and that is no attack on Iran, make a deal with North Korea, but attack Pakistan, get ready to attack Sudan, get ready to attack Zimbabwe, get ready to attack Burma. In many cases, it's done under humanitarian considerations. It's not bin Laden al-Qaida. Pakistan is the exception.
वेबस्टर टार्पले की गुफ्तगू आपने सुनी.